Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack what is, without a doubt, one of the most bizarre military conflicts in human history. We're looking at a piece of source material today that frames this entire event perfectly under the theatrical banner of Dumb Wars. And honestly, that is spot on. Today we are talking about the infamous Great Emu War of 1932. Seriously, just picture the scene for a second. Imagine hearing someone scream that over the sheer chaos of a battlefield. They're outmaneuvering our machine guns. The emus are tactical geniuses. That panicked quote perfectly captures the absolute absurdity we're about to explore together. Because keep in mind, we're not talking about a highly trained opposing human army here. We are talking about the actual Australian military going toe-to-toe with a massive flock of flightless birds. And, spoiler alert, losing. All right, Section 1, a royal avian demand, seeking a legacy beyond sexy calves. So, our source material playfully sets the stage by imagining King Henry VIII demanding a story about an enemy with heavily muscular legs, which, is a completely ridiculous setup, but it perfectly matches the bizarre historical stakes we're dealing with. Okay, so let's set the actual scene. It's 1932, and Australia is right in the thick of a little ding-dong known as the Great Depression. The economy is an absolute mess. The government is constantly turning over. Things are tense. But then, early in the year, this massive animal migration sweeps right into the Western Australian wheat belt. And by late 1932, things have escalated so out of control that farmers are desperately demanding a full-blown military intervention. The sheer scale of this migration is absolutely crucial here. 20,000. That is the number of emus that just decided to move in. When 20,000 massive, hungry, flightless birds decide your wheat fields are their new permanent home, it creates, as our source very politely puts it, a few unforeseen problems in the future. And those unforeseen problems, they were pretty severe. We're not just talking about the emus pecking at a few stray seeds. Oh, no. They engaged in what the text literally calls loathsome gluttony. They ate every single crop in sight. It was like they were hosting a massive costume party right in their stomachs, just gorging on the livelihoods of these farmers. Naturally, the farmers were, quote, bitterly spiteful. They didn't want to just set up a scarecrow. They wanted what the source jokes as free money like a crazy person in the form of heavy military aid. Which brings us to Section 2. Major Meredith takes command, preparing for feathery treason. The desperate farmers demanded action, and the Minister of Defense saw what he thought was a golden opportunity to look really, really good on the world stage. Think about the sheer ridiculous mismatch of these opposing forces for a second. On side A, we've got Major Meredith, 2 soldiers, and 2 Lewis machine guns. That is it. And on side B, 20,000 highly motivated flightless birds. When you strip the conflict down to its absolute basics like this, you can immediately see the overwhelming hubris of the military's plan. And Major Meredith? Oh, he was totally bought into that hubris. He reportedly felt that he had been sitting in his office with a heart full of fire, entirely ready to be the nation's savior. He wasn't playing around here. He fully expected a swift, highly sophisticated victory over these animals. He marched his men straight into the outback, completely confident in human military superiority. All right, Section 3, Tactical Emu Geniuses, or the naughty high-altitude enthusiasts. Because when the battle actually began, out there in the dirt, the emus did something nobody saw coming. Literally every single time the soldiers set up those heavy machine guns, the birds pulled off these evasive maneuvers that were, quote, a little too open to interpretation. Instead of clumping together to be easy targets, they immediately split off into tiny, chaotic groups and just sprinted in every possible direction. It left the soldiers completely and utterly dumbfounded, leading to this very real, very desperate question on the battlefield. Are these birds just frickin' weirdos, or are they actually tactical geniuses? Major Meredith's response to his panicking men was just, don't be a dum-dum, fire the guns! But actually firing the guns was proving to be completely useless against this kind of avian guerrilla warfare. And right here, our source material injects this brilliant, modern internet trope, a meta break for Skillshare. It jokes that if you want to avoid this exact kind of military disaster, you shouldn't be a dum-dum. You could just use Skillshare to learn how to build a fence that actually works. Or maybe take a class to get sexy calves like King Henry. It's this fantastic comedic breather in the text that points out how a simple, practical solution, like, a sturdy fence, might have been 1,000 times better than deploying machine guns. But let's jump right back into the battlefield chaos. Section 4. The disastrous truck chase. A bumpy confectionery crisis. So, since standing still was proving entirely useless, the soldiers devised a highly vigorous new plan.
The genius idea? They decided to mount one of the machine guns onto the back of a truck to just aggressively chase the emus down. But, as you might guess, the terrain in the outback was so incredibly bumpy that the gunner couldn't hit a single feather. And then came the ultimate slapstick climax of the whole operation. An emu reportedly got caught in the truck's steering wheel. This caused a massive, spectacular crash. Our source jokingly compares it to a confectionery crisis, just, with a lot more dust and far fewer eclairs. 0 successful hits and completely wrecked military equipment.
And this utter, embarrassing defeat really broke the commanding officer. The source humorously captures Meredith's emotional breakdown over these tenacious, muscular birds with this incredibly absurd quote, "I'm not crying, it's just that sometimes when I get sad, water comes out of my eyes." The grand, sophisticated military strategy had completely and totally collapsed into the dirt. Section 5. A humiliating defeat. And the amazing solution of giving up. Yeah, about a month into this ridiculous campaign, the military finally had to face the cold, hard facts. They ultimately chose the most amazing solution available to them. They literally just packed up and quit. Major Meredith was officially recalled, or fired as the text jokes, and the military completely withdrew. And the crucial takeaway is right here in the final tally. The Australian military fired 2,500 rounds of machine gun ammunition, and their casualties were, basically they just lost all their pride. The emus, on the other hand, successfully ate the wheat and only lost a few hundred birds out of a massive flock of 20,000. The emus effectively won. They were left alone to continue their loathsome gluttony, the farmers were still totally bankrupt, and the government was incredibly embarrassed on a global scale. To tie a bow on this whole weird historical anomaly, our source brings back that King Henry VIII theatrical framing device. Hearing of this beautiful story of immense property damage and military failure against birds with muscular legs, the king declares, "If they won't pay for the wheat, they can kiss yus my bussius, off with their wings." It is a perfectly absurd ending to a genuinely, perfectly absurd piece of history. Which leaves us with this final thought. We've just seen how terribly machine guns and trucks fared against nature's tactical geniuses out in the Australian outback. So I've got to ask you, if 20,000 giant, hungry birds invaded your town tomorrow, who are you calling? Because as history so clearly shows us right here, calling in the military might just make things a whole lot worse. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep your eyes on the skies, and I'll see you next time.